So several years ago, the church where I was serving was headed on a mission trip. Some of the young adults got together and remembered their youth group trips fondly, and so they wanted to create something for adults. As the youngest staff member, I was elected to go on that trip and to help them along the way. They had a rich tradition of cooking their meals. The only problem was that the person who had been in charge of cooking the meals and purchasing groceries was of an age where she had said, I am not going on mission trips anymore. I just can't do it. I can't sleep in sleeping bags. So you're on your own. And I happen to have grown up on a farm. So I am accustomed to cooking for large groups of people. So I said, oh, we'll be fine. And we set a menu, we made plans, we went to the store, and we had everything ready. And of course, one of the items on our list was spaghetti. Feed a lot of people, everyone likes it, it's nice and cheap. The only problem with that plan is that it's really hard to get the right amount of spaghetti. Now, I should add that when I say I grew up on a farm and grew up cooking for large groups, that is very true, and I especially grew up cooking for large groups when it was time to put in hay. And my dad would hire teenage boys to come and help him put in hay. And I didn't count on the fact that they ate like teenage boys. And so whatever food you put in front of them was going to disappear. So you didn't really worry about what you had as much as having lots and lots of it. And unfortunately, my cooking for the mission trip took on that kind of iteration, especially the spaghetti. The first night, we all had spaghetti. And then a second night, we all had spaghetti. And there were still leftovers, and not just a few leftovers, like lots of leftovers. So several of the people ate leftovers for lunch since we were coming back to the space we were staying in to eat them. One of the leaders even took one for the team and began shoveling in spaghetti like a champ at every single chance he got. I'm pretty sure he even had some spaghetti for breakfast. And on the last day of the trip, he had the gallon Ziploc baggie full of spaghetti as he was eating it. And the look he had on his face was not one of happiness, including happiness toward me. So our gospel text this morning was the story of the 5,000, feeding the 5,000, maybe the 25,000 since it's just the number of men recorded. And I think when we hear that story, we have a serene, Bible-y sort of response. Like, how wonderful. We've heard this story in Sunday school. There's all this left over, and there's symbolism in the 12 baskets. It's great. And in all of our caught up about how wonderful it is, I think maybe we should be laughing some. Maybe even a little bit of frustrated, because I imagine the disciples standing there looking at 12 baskets going, what do we do with it? Who here is going to spend the next few days eating all of this fish and these loaves? Like, does it work like a church potluck where you find the college kid, whatever the ancient world equivalent is, and say, hey, here's food to take home because they're always hungry? Is it like the potluck where you know the families who are especially in need and so you pack up leftovers to give them an extra meal that week? And the truth is, this is a story where there's a part that we forget about. Everyone came there for healing. This is kind of the secondary miracle out of that first miracle. So they're amassing thousands as the day goes by. And I imagine that day unfolding with increasing absurdity as Jesus just keeps saying, more, more. And the disciples start looking at each other wondering how on earth they're getting out of this mess. It all very much reminds me of when Harry Potter gets his letter from Hogwarts. It went like this. So culture, we've learned this notion of coming on too strong. I think it especially informs our romantic relationships. You don't want to come on too strong too soon. I know as a church, it informs our relationships. I always try to figure out a nice way to tell visitors, don't worry, if you give us your address, we won't show up at your door. But I think with existing relationships, it should be different. My mom was diagnosed with dementia about a year ago, and I had realized from long distance that something was wrong. She's not making sense, something's going on. And so I called a woman from the church that I grew up in, and I said, can you tell me what's going on? You're there, I'm not, I need to know. And her response was, oh, Abby, I've been so worried. I almost called you, but I didn't want to stick my nose in where it didn't belong. Now, I needed her. I needed her voice. She ended up taking my mom to a doctor's appointment since I'm on the other side of the country. But when I think of all of these stories of Jesus choosing to act, choosing to do something, these stories of deep abundance from our gospel, stories of abundance that we tell through Harry Potter, I am so aware we need that push beyond our culture, beyond what we would be told to do, to get involved, to do something, to love fiercely and broadly, to go out of your way, to be the one who says yes when so many who have said no, to be the person who makes space for someone else, to be the person who fills up your Thanksgiving table with the most absurd collections of people, ones who invite too soon and keep asking, to be the person who sends a gazillion letters and in the middle of all of that to embrace the awkward that goes with it. Because we often talk about loving our neighbor and what that means and how we do that, but long before anybody can ever feel love, we need to feel wanted. That kind of fierce love was terrifying to the Dursleys, people that Harry Potter lived with. But it was the best news that Harry had ever gotten. When he's getting those letters, he doesn't know a thing about Hogwarts. He doesn't know what's coming. He doesn't know what he is signing up for. But he did know he was wanted. He did know that he was deeply, unbelievably wanted. It was the same sort of experience like the people who found Jesus even out in a deserted place. They realized that in the presence of him, they were wanted. They were wanted enough to heap miracle on top of miracle on top of miracle, with the disciples not quite sure what to do about it. And so we choose to be like Jesus, or Dumbledore, if you need. But we choose to want people, to love with overwhelming, laughable abundance, to choose this way of following Jesus again and again. Amen.